Hello everybody, it's Barb here. I wanted to talk some more about some general Barbarian feedback. I feel Barbarian right now in Season 1 is decently strong, but that mainly comes down to the Barber gem and not the Barbarian class itself. And I'm very concerned of like what will happen once Season 2 will end and the Barber heart is gone. And I have played a lot of Barb, pretty much all the builds. I made tier lists, I made videos about a lot of stuff, a lot of builds and a lot of problems that the Barb already has. I wanted to like summarize it all here in one video. So the first thing we want to talk about is rework or buff to the unique items. I already made a separate video about this that I'm going to link in the description. But basically, too long didn't watch, almost all of the Barbarian Uniques remain a niche use case or just too weak to be competitive to like really good rolled rare items that you then put a good aspect on. I have a full list up here of which items I think are good and which items need a rework and some suggestions or some feedback what could be done to improve those. Again, I'm going to put that video and all the full explanation in the description. The next system I want to talk about is the Barb class mechanic, which is the Arsenal system. So there's a couple problems with the Arsenal system. In general, I really like the fantasy of it. Like Barb is like the weapon master and you really have like all these weapons that you can use and switch. I think it's very, very cool. But the first problem I have with the Arsenal system is that on some skills, they are just not part of the Arsenal system, even though they deal damage. One example is Ground Stomp. If you notice, like if I take Ground Stomp on my bar, or let's take Steel Grasp as well, because maybe that's a more frequently used example. Like here on Lunging Strike, you see I have this like Arsenal selection and I can select like all the different weapons I want to be using with it. But Steel Grasp, even though it deals 23% damage, I can't use or I can't select the weapon that I want to attack with. Same goes for Ground Stomp. And there's multiple weapons, multiple skills, like Kick is another one, where you just can't select the weapon. And this has a lot of problems. First of all, like how is the damage calculated? Like it does 23% damage, yeah, but of which weapon? Like do I need to have a good mace? Do I need to do I need to have good like swords? Do I need to have a good 200 sword? Like, you know, like it's just not intuitive. And you also cannot unlock like your various bonuses that you get from the expertise. Like if I attack with Steel Grasp, which expertise, which bonus will I get, you know? Like it's just not there. And you also can't proc your walking arsenal with it. You know, if I'm just out here like killing some monsters, I get procs whenever I use a skill that has a weapon assigned to it. But the problem is with Kick or Steel Grasp for that matter or Ground Stomp, I can't assign a weapon. So it further limits. So let's see if I'm attacking here, I'm getting the dual wield buff. But if I'm doing my Steel Grasp, I don't get any buff. And this is crazy. Like you can't really get the damage bonus from it, and it's just like not part of the Arsenal system. Like how is the damage calculated? Which bonus do I get? Why can I not proc the Arsenal system stuff? So I think that's just like a big limiting factor here on the Arsenal system. And I think it's very unintuitive, especially for newer players and even for like veteran players. Like how exactly does it work? How's the weapon calculated? How's the damage calculated even? So that's I think one of the things. Like I think all the skills should be in the Arsenal system on the bar because that's the class specific mechanic. Next we have, very related to that, we have the technique slot. And the technique slot basically allows you to have any weapon bonus, no matter which weapon you use. So you can get your, like if you're attacking with a 200 sword, you can also get an axe bonus. But the problem is, if you're reading here already, and you're leveling those skills, you always have an additional rank 10 bonus. But in the technique slot, you don't get that. So you spend like all this time, especially in a new player, when I had to experience this the first time, I spent like all this time like leveling up my expertise all the way to rank 10, only to realize that you don't even get the rank 10 additional bonus from the technique slot. And this becomes a very big problem and further limits build diversity if you're looking, for example, at a 200 sword expertise. So if you want to play like any bleed orientated build, you're pretty much forced to take a 200 sword in your main weapon and attack with your 200 sword if you want the bleed bonus. Like if you want the 1.3 increased bleeding damage multiplier, you need to attack with it, because if you take 200 sword in a technique slot, all you get is the base effect, which is 20% of direct damages inflicted as bleed. But you're completely missing the 1.3 multiplier. And that just limits your build diversity so much, because if you like want to play like a bleed oriented build, you're pretty much pigeonholed into like attacking with your 200 sword. So you can't really use a polearm, you can't use like, you know, any of the other things, an axe or something. Even if you have like a GG rolled axe, or you want to play, I don't know, like the Rend Barb with like Ramalaldi with 2 one-handers or something. Nah, you can't do that. You must play with a sword if you want the 1.3 multiplier. So I think if they add the rank 10 effect here into the technique slots, because I don't think Barbs are OP by any means right now. If you compare it to like Necro, Rogue, or Druid, I don't think it would hurt if we also get the rank 10 effect in the technique slot. And I think it's more intuitive for the player, and it encourages you more to level the technique stuff, in my opinion. And it just adds so much build diversity to it. The next thing is also very related, is weapon swapping. Right now, there's a lot of bonuses if you're swapping your weapon, right? If you have like the different skills that use different weapons and stuff, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of bonuses, like I think in the Paragon, in the glyphs here, there's a lot of them. Like if you weapon swap, you gain additional damage. Yeah, swapping weapons has an 80% chance to cause the skills damage to critically strike. And there's also a lot of legendaries or aspects that increase your damage when you weapon swap. This one, for example, after swapping weapon 10 times, and there's many of these, you need to swap weapons like really like a lot to even gain any bonuses. And in reality or in practice, it's like it takes like minimum 10 seconds or something to like switch weapon 10 times. Like most of the times, if you're losing like clunky skills like upheaval or something like that, it like just gets so clunky. Like it just takes forever to even swap your weapon once. So I think the buffs and the bonuses that you have are pretty good, but it just takes too long to activate them. And yeah, that just feels clunky, and maybe these numbers could come significantly down, or we could like do something with the animations of certain skills like upheaval, like just speed up the animations a bit. But mainly like just like reduce the amount of times that you have to switch the weapons, like maybe to like 5, like at least half it or something. And then obviously like they need to make Overpower work, which is the next point. So yeah, Overpower is already a mechanic that they want to look at for Season 2. Similar to like some of the unique effects like Harlequin, Crest, and Grandfather. They want to make it more droppable. So that's a good step, looking at Overpower again. Because man, when I first learned about Overpower, I was actually hyped, man, because it's like always a dream. Like, you know, Barbarian is usually like the melee class that is like pretty tanky and stuff. And using that tankiness, like the life pool, like the damage reduction, the fortify, as something offensive to deal damage as well, is such a cool concept, right? But just right now, how Overpower works, it just does not have any impact whatsoever. Like there's just nothing you can do with Overpower. Like early on, it might be okay, but in the leveling process, but later it just doesn't do any damage. Like it literally has no impact in the game. And they have like all this like different color, like it's like a blue number if you actually overpower and stuff. So they have like all this system, but that's just useless right now. And I'm very happy that they are looking at this already. And I hope to see that this will be some viable choice as the Barb, because you have like a lot of stuff that does overpower. Like we looked at the legendary before, and you have like these passives right now that are completely useless. Like Brute Force. I don't think I've ever spec'd a point into this passive. You overpower, it deals 15% increased weapon damage when you use a 200 weapon, stuff like that, right? Even here the bleed passive has like overpowering, creates this and that. Problem is like overpower only has a 3% chance. And there's like some skills, I think like there's a Hoda rune here. If you overpower you get more multiplier as well, but you just like have no way of really overpowering. There's like one rune on Bash here, like after critting 4 times you overpower. There could be definitely some nuances if overpower is viable and it does like some significant damage. I think that could be very nice. So very good to see that they're looking at this. Definitely make this, maybe make the chance go higher and make it like scale with all your multipliers and to make it actually some relevant damage. And there's also a lot of legendary nodes here that have overpower on the Barb. And all the legendary nodes in general just feel very, very weak, or way too weak on Barb. If you compare it, for example, to the Druid, like the Druid has, I guess we could just open one of the Druid nodes. Say we go to, let's go to Tornado. Yeah, like this one, for example, Heightened Malice. Like this is a proper node, right? And Necro or Rogue have something like this as well. Necro has like something after exploding corpses, you get like a 1.4 multiplier. And just imagine this one for Barb. While there are 3 or more poisoned enemies nearby, you deal multiplicative 45% increased damage. On Barb, it could just read while there are 3 or more bleeding enemies nearby. But Barb doesn't have any of that. What Barb has, for example, is just completely ridiculous. Like most of the builds have no legendary nodes whatsoever. And then you have nodes like this. On lucky hit. Like lucky hit is already like very rare, right? Like most of your skills have like a 20% chance to lucky hit. And on that 20% chance, you have another 8% chance, but only if you lucky hit and only if you're using a two-handed slashing weapon. So once in a blue moon, you have an 8% chance to proc vulnerability for 2 seconds. Like, in my opinion, this has to be like one of the worst nodes in the game. I looked at it and I cannot think of rare nodes that are worse than this. Like even like all the rare nodes that I have, they're just all better. Like this just does nothing, you know? Like even this would be better. Like it's crazy. Like literally like all the rare nodes, and this is a legendary node. Like you have to go out of your way to spec this. So yeah, it's just crazy to me how like the Druid has this 45, 1.45 on poison. You know, you could just do this with bleed, for example. But yeah, and then on most of my builds here, I'm like so close to some of these legendary nodes, like for example here. But we already talked about Overpower, Bonebreaker. I'm literally 3 points away from this legendary node because taking Bulwark here is like it's pretty strong. Like these nodes here, Bulwark, damage reduction by Fortify, this kind of stuff is really good on Barb. And I'm 3 nodes away, but there's just no point in ever taking this, right? Because Overpower is just like not working, or like it's just like super weak, does nothing pretty much, right? So yeah, that's just another like major letdown. And there's like multiple Paragon nodes. Like you see, most of my builds, see, I don't have a single legendary node. The only node that some builds take is Warbringer here. But even right now with the bleed meta, you don't even need that because you don't spend as much fury. So they're just like feeling very, very weak, these Paragon nodes. And I think they could use like a huge rework to make it more in line with like Druid, Necro, Rogue nodes. I think the Sorcerer also has pretty bad nodes, but yeah, Barb and Sora could need a buff and bring them certainly a bit closer to like some of the crazy stuff that Druid has here. Here, 30% increased crit damage against vulnerable targets. Like, wow. Like, that's a node, right? Not like 8% chance to do on a lucky hit with a 200 weapon to make stuff vulnerable for 2 seconds. Like, come on. There's a lot of stuff here. And then last but not least, I wanted to touch on this. Leveling experience still feels way worse on Barb. I've seen some of the times on like speedrun.com and some of the, you know, like people that basically do this for many hours and just like try to level the characters. I think Sorcerer is like more than doubling the Barb's time. And Barb is just like far below everything else. Even the Druid now is got some buffs and it feels way better than Barb. And yeah, Barb is just like the weakest class by a huge margin, doing 1-250 and doing the capstone dungeon. I think like the classes like Sorcerer and stuff, Necro as well, they can do like the capstone dungeon to tier 3 like 10 levels below the Barbarian or something. Like it's not even fair. Like it's not even like a fight. And yeah, full regen is still a problem on low levels, and I don't know, just damage in general. Like Barb just needs more ways of dealing damage and even more ways of surviving on low levels. Just like there's just a big imbalance there. But yeah, that has been my list here. Tier list, feedback on the uniques, arsenal system, technique slot, weapon swapping, overpower, legendary nodes, legendary paragon nodes, and the leveling experience. I think if we get some of these changes in the next seasons, in the next time, that would be amazing. That would be a big buff for the Barb. That is much needed, especially after the Barber will be gone here. We'll see what they have in store for us, but that's my 2 cents. If you have more suggestions, guys, make sure to leave them in the chat or in the comments. I'm going to read all of them, and I'll see. Maybe we can expand this list, and who knows, maybe we'll get some positivity and some positive constructive feedback and changes out of this. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe, leave a like or a comment. I'm also live on Twitch almost every day, so come and say hi.